Hey everyone, Eggman here with Top 10 Tuesday number 2 of Series 2 Union Force. This is the second set, obviously, that has come out for the game. And honestly, this is like the least knowledgeable set I have. I started playing in 2018, and this was the second half of 2017. And most of Series 1 was pretty much like the top 10 broken cards that I showed it, and then everything else was trash and never really used again. So this one was a bit trickier. Especially because I, had this memory of like a bunch of cards being good for like a couple months when Series 2 came out, like right before I joined, and then afterwards they kind of fell off. So this list will probably be a little bit more up and down, and probably more, I guess, controversial for what placements. For sure, the top five I think is pretty solid, but the five between 10 and 6 might be a little bit more controversial. So definitely want to hear what you guys think about this. And yeah, let's just jump on into it with number 10.
Number 10.
First is Mind Controlling Bobbity. I had a really hard time figuring out where to place this card, if it should be on the list, if it should be an honorable mention. I decided to just have it as number 10 as kind of like a gatekeeper, just because this card was moderately good, and then it could have been super good, but they eroded it to not be super good, and have a kind of cheap combo with it, which I think was good for the time. It kind of goes around against like their design decision now. And everything, but what it does is when you play this card, look at top 7 cards from your deck, choose up to 2 red battle cards among them 25k power or less other than Evil Wizard Bobbity, and play them, then shuffle your deck. And then it got changed to auto if you have 6 or more red energy when you play this card, and it's a 6 drop as well. So it just means that if you cheat this out before you have 6 energy, you don't get the effect to summon 2 cards, which I think is the right move for a lot of ways, but it's just really interesting that this was eroded before this happened. I think if this happened nowadays, this card would probably be banned instead of, or they would not make the like chain attack trunks the way they did, or just make sure like this interaction didn't really exist. So, but yeah, I just decided to put it at number 10. People still use it after errata and kind of like mild success with it, but it wasn't terribly good ever, but it really just had like potential, and I think like the errata is notable, so I decided to put it as number 10. But let's keep moving to number 9.
Number 9.
For number 9, I decided to choose the free play combos. Every color got one except for kind of green. They got like a really, really stinky kind of Tien, which I guess was kind of helpful for Self Awakening, but like these ones I think were just more generically good. And like a lot of people like were really hoping green like had like a regular one, and by the time they did, it was kind of late. But all 3 of these are really good. This Gohan's probably used like the most because blue has all this floating energy, and blue was kind of control-y, so this was a good card for there. Vegeta was really nice, especially when Pan came out as a leader, because you could use this. This is a 1 energy 15k that you could also play in your opponent's turn, so you get more draws from Pan, which is super nice. And then Frieza was probably more archetype driven, but since you could get this out for 1, then with Golden Frieza you could pop it really easily, and then use it, get free energy with all that kind of stuff, while also being on the defense if you need it. So these cards were pretty good, and I think they were run for a very long time. This is kind of like the original Arrival in a lot of ways, before Arrival happened and everything. And it was really one of the few ways like something like could be played or like summoned during like a combo step or battle step, even though these are played afterwards and they're played in rest. This is just like and I don't know, they're not very good anymore. They'd be really slow, and you'd rather just Arrival something out right now instead of playing these cards. But I think these were just really like stepping stones to what we have for Arrival, and just really important for that kind of history for it. So if I was to choose one of these for being best, it'd probably be Vegeta, just because it's also Vegeta and it has like a lot of potential for just being good with Hercule, because that's red, and also like Gogeta stuff and everything. But I think all 3 of these were good and serve their purposes, and probably have some purpose now. Like Vegeta, I still think can be played in Pan, and it just makes a lot of sense for that. But everything else, I think there are kind of better options for it.
Number 8.
Our first leader on the list, and also until set 10 comes out, the only Trunks future leader we have, despite having 9 sets and everything, which is just weird to me that I didn't really realize that. But he's really good, and he was very good for a while, especially the later half of 2018 with storm techniques and everything. But he's just a blue trunks leader, and auto once per turn. During your turn, when you combo with a card that has any cost of 2 or more, draw 1 card, and when your life is at 4 or less, you may draw 2 cards and flip those cards over. And auto once per turn during your turn, when you combo with a card that has energy of 2 or more, draw 1. And then when this card attacks, draw 1. So I think this is a cool leader, and also with Series 10 coming out, this is a Trunks leader, so if people want to use it again, that's cool. The only thing I am worried about it is that like it kind of doesn't have like draw on the front. I mean, it like sort of has draw, but it's just kind of weird how it works, and you have to like kind of commit stuff to it. But I think he's not like the worst leader, and he was like people used this guy for a really long time. Just because like Series 2 has just in general their leaders are really unique in a lot of stuff, but they just didn't generate enough value to be very good for very long. But everyone tried to use them, and they have a lot of cool stuff going for them. So I think Trunks was one of the few ones that could survive that. Just because like he was still like passively drawing, and like you want to combo cards anyways, so like drawing cards for doing stuff you want to already do is good. He was blue, which helped out a lot of stuff. And he's also a Saiyan leader, which was nice. And also he's Trunks' future, so he gets his free blocker. So he was very good for a while, and I still think he's a kind of good leader. And hopefully he gets rebooted. He's one of the leaders I hope they reboot in one of the feature sets.
Number 7.
So we've got Hidden Awakening Kale, and I know I didn't play a lot of set 2, but this was definitely a card I remember being played, and was probably one of the most expensive cards during its time for a while. Especially, like, it was really around $35 per copy when I started playing the game, and it really just stayed there for a really long time. Not to mention when the Kaaba and Khalifa came out in the Union Force set and Dash Pack. This just continued to remain just really expensive, and it just does a lot, and it's probably like one of the best 4-drops that existed at the time. It had critical. When you play this card, choose up to one of your battle cards, KO it, then choose any number of your opponent's battle cards, of which the total cost is up to 5 or less, and KO them. So being able to do that, and like you could swing with something, and then you play Kale, you pop the thing that's in rest mode, and then you just clear their board, which is super nice. And then also when this card attacks, if you have 5 or less cards in hand, draw 1. And hand sizes weren't like they were today. It was really like a really grindy matchup, so like you would almost always draw 1 from this card. It was very difficult not to have 5 more than 5 cards in hand. So it just really did it all, and it was just very powerful. And unfortunately 4-drops just kind of aren't good right now, especially since like they're the upper echelon of like things like preemptive strike and denial of hope, kind of like not denial of hope per se, but this can get hit by denial of hope, which just feels really bad. So we just haven't seen like a lot of 4-drops, but 4 used to be like the turn that a lot of decks like went off and dropped like a big boss monster, and Kale was definitely one of the best ones, if not the best at its time. So loved this card. It was probably relevant for at least a year, but now that we have other Kales, and now that veggies aren't as inherently good, it probably it's not being seen as much play, but it's a very cool card, and I just remember being very scared whenever our opponent would drop this.
Number 6.
We've got the Android 17 and 18 leader, and this leader used to be like the best green leader for the longest time. And if you don't remember or you weren't there, much of 2018 green decks were mostly just cell chain. There wasn't enough room or wasn't enough like support for green to really have any good decks, and so they really just had to play cell chain. And this was the best cell chain leader, so it was fantastic. And this was just a really good, solid leader, especially since it had the unique thing of, one, it reduced the energy cost of Android 17 and 18 in your hand by 1, but also when your life is at 6 or less, you may draw 2 cards and flip this card over, which, Self-Awakening just twice is super duper easy to do. It's hard to stall out, and with, like, during the, end of 2018, there's so many ways to Self-Awaken, that it was super easy to just awaken on, like, turn 1 or 2 with this leader. And then it becomes like a modern leader, because whenever you're awakened, you swing, you draw 1. So that's why this leader lasted for as long as it did. It was also, like, once again, the best Android leader for a very long time. So Cell Chain would always go into this. You'd get so much draw because you'd awaken early. You get 2 cards from your life, 2 from the top of your deck, and then you kept swinging and you draw 1, which a lot of leaders back before like set 4 didn't generate value on the front side. So like just being able to awaken as soon as you could with only 6 life this definitely was off to the races, especially when this was gaining card advantage when also destroying your opponent's hand. It just felt very good. So very interesting. And then just and what reducing the cost of Android 17s and 18s in your hand are great. And then also permanent if your life is at 4 or less, all your Android 17 18s gain plus 5k power. So I don't really know what else to say about this leader. A lot of people are this is like a lot of people's beloved leader for a very long time, and even people are trying to play in 2019. I definitely played people in tournament with against this, so I don't know what else to say. It's very good. Being able to awaken at 16, 6 life, but I think we're finally on the bend of where we have better Android leaders, and this is getting a little bit on the wayside. But I think this is also a leader that could be brought back with a reboot leader, and a lot of people would be very happy. So maybe that will happen as well.
Number 5.
So here we are in the top 5, and I'm pretty dang confident about these cards in here. They're all definitely very powerful, and I don't think anyone will contest that. We're going to start with Mokuba, which if Series 1's best negate was Whist's Coercion, Mokuba was definitely the best negate, if not in Series 2 the entire game. And for a very long time, people were using this card, and I still think it has some relevance today. It has counter battle card attack for 2 energy, which is pretty steep back in the day, but now that we've got like a lot more energy untapping and having 2 energy open during your opponent's turn is pretty common nowadays. But negate the attack and place this card on the attacking card at the end of your opponent's turn. Place this card and only this card in the drop area. As long as this card is stacked on top of the other card, it is not treated as a battle card and its skill cannot be activated. So it just like removes the card, and for technically 2 turns, and so if you win the next 2 turns, you just KO the card technically. So very good there. And it gets around when this card first came out. Barrier wasn't a thing, but then it did become a thing, and then Mokuba got around it anyways. And it was one of the few cards that did, because this card doesn't choose anything. It doesn't have the word choose. And I'm not sure if that's just like a translation thing or something, and they just decided to go with it, but that worked out to its benefit. When the card first got released as well, they ruled that after the Mokuba jar came out, it was still in rest. So if something swung, you put Mokuba and then you took the jar off, you could just still attack into it on your next turn because it was in rest mode. They changed it to where it would be untapped during your charge phase. So it was kind of nerfed like that by the rules, but it was very good. Blue became one of the premier control decks, so this was obviously in there for that. Like Janimba for sure ran this card, and it was one of the few cards that actually got around Victory Strike back in the day, because you can't negate the attack from Victory Strike, but you can still Mokuba it, and you're not like you can just get around like the permanent of Victory Strike with this card, which was very good and pretty much made people have to at least side Battering Laser just to get rid of this Mokuba. I don't know what else to say of this card. It's very good. People are still using it. It still has its relevance, and I think it's as long as like leaving 2 energy opens for a negate isn't too bad, people are going to use it. I still think it's had a little bit of a falling out lately, but I still think it's a very good card.
Number 4.
Okay, here's the boy, Zeno the Playing God. This is such a super weird card, and like a lot of people hate this card, and it has never been banned or anything like that, but I feel like it's gone pretty close a couple times. And so let's just read it first. So when you play this card, negate the all other battle card skills, then choose all cards in both players' hands, as well as other battle cards, and return them to their deck. Shuffle both decks afterwards. Then both players draw 5 cards stacked under the cards are placed in the drop area. So the idea is like if Yu-Gi-Oh is like a fiber jar, right? Everyone resets the board and their hands. Technically, you would have the advantage if you played it because you'd have Zeno on the board, but then both players would just have 5 cards in hand. But this was just such a good card because you could cheat it out, and that's like obviously like no one's playing this card for 7, but when you can play it for technically 3 or 2 energy, or even 4 energy, playing this card for 4 energy, it was still super good. With Chain Attack could get this card out, and it was so dang good. Especially since in Series 3 and onward, the idea of making big boards that were hard to break were a thing, so you just play Zeno and then you just wipe their board, and they feel very bad about it. Especially since this doesn't choose anything, and it also negates battle card skills, so It doesn't care about barrier, which was a big thing in Series 3. Series 3 had too many cards, in my opinion, with barrier and a lot of cards with protection. So Zeno was really the only way to break boards and just anything like that. And in my mind, a lot of other people's mind, it was a terrible card for the game, but it was a kind of a necessary evil to combat like some very even more degenerate decks, I guess. And it was just a lot of RNG, especially since like you have to find this card. A lot of decks that are running this card were playing almost mono red besides this card. So, and also it doesn't have any combo cost, or it doesn't have any combo. So it was like a dead card in hand a lot of the time. But if you saw it and you're able to get the card out, you're feeling pretty good, and hopefully you just drew better than your opponent as well. Like that's the other thing you got to be careful of. But if your opponent's going really aggro and they're taking a bunch of cards out of their life, and then you just play Zeno, then you have exactly the same resources, but like you have 6 life and maybe your opponent has like 4 life or something. So that's the idea for this card. I think people still use it and still mess around with it, and I don't think it's bad. There are definitely more ways to negate this card's skill, which is a little bit trickier to deal with. But as long as people are building big boards, this is definitely an answer for him. So there's that one.
Number 3.
We've got the boy, growing evil life form cell. This is such a weird situation that he's in. He's limited to 1, and I think he's like the only one that is right now. He had like a big archetype with him for a very long time, and then Bandai was just like, okay, we're done with it, but we don't want to ban it. We just want to make it like really, really inconsistent and not worth it to be played anymore. Like he's pretty much banned because no one's playing this card at 1. But anyone who is just trying to make a cheese deck with it. And I don't even know if he, like, there's probably like a whole debate, like, does this card deserve to be banned anymore? If I was to lean one way, I'd say probably not, but that's another video. But what's it do? It's got Uni Absorb, place 1 Android 17 from your hand under this card. Choose up to 1 cell with any cost of 5 or less from your deck and play it on top of this card. Shuffle your deck afterwards. So it seems like not super, like, kind of underwhelming just based on that. And it's a 3-drop, which is pretty heavy for a card with no deflect or barrier. But what really was the big thing, and I'm not going to like do the thing that I usually do, say, oh, the whole cell chain is number 3. No, this card is strictly number 3. But we have to talk about the cell chain, and Perfect Force Cell was such a good card for such a long time. It was like relevant for like as long as this card was out. This was relevant. As long as the Growing Evil Lifeform Cell was at 4, this was a relevant deck to play. And conversely, that's kind of how I feel of why I think it's strictly this card. Perfect Force Cell is not good without Growing Evil Lifeform Cell, or something that does the same thing as him. But Growing Evil Lifeform Cell could still probably be pretty good with kind of like the other cell cards we have right now. And so what does Perfect Force Cell, if you don't know, for auto, when you play this card, if your leader card is an android, your opponent must choose cards in their hand until there are only 3 remaining and place their chosen cards in the drop. So it's kind of like the OG Gogeta 7, if that makes sense. You just play this card, and then your opponent has to go down to 3 cards, and they just feel very bad about it. And so the chain is that you play this 3-drop, you choose this 5-drop Evolving Evil Lifeform Cell, and then this has Union Absorb, place 1 Android 18 from your hand under this card, choose up to 1 cell from your deck and place it on top of this card, shuffle afterwards. It has Double Strike and Auto. When you play this card with Union, draw 1, then choose one of your opponent's battle cards and KO that card, and then you go into this guy. So you have to like go into they have to be in your deck, which was I don't know, kind of hard sometimes, especially when you consider the life area. And then also you had to give up 2 cards in your hand, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when we didn't have like a lot of cycle like we did back in, we didn't have as much cycle as we do now. Back in the day, it was very hard to get that sometimes, unless you're running Android 17, 18, and you just awaken them super early, and now you have all your resources. But just a very good deck in a lot of ways, and just a good archetype, like just putting your opponent to 3 cards in hand and like turn 3. That seems good, and then you have like this big double strike that has 30k power, and there's not like a bunch of card destruction, and most of them say like 4 or less. So it's just a good deck in a lot of ways, and I think this Growing Evil Lifeform Cell was the 100% the backbone for it. Being able to go into this on turn 3, like playing this on like turn 7 or even like evolving on turn 6, this card wouldn't be very good. But playing it on like even playing on turn 5, like just playing Evolving Evil Lifeform Cell and then going into it, I don't think this card's good, and I don't like, it's not like a good card because of that. It's just takes too much time to go for, and it was strictly just being able to do it on turn 3 and just dropping a big threat very early, where like making your opponent go down to 3 cards without being able to really set up and everything. So that's my opinion on that. Let me know if you think this card needs to be banned or freed, but it's they're just going to be for now, I guess, in this awkward situation where we've only got one.
Number 2.
Next up, we've got the top 2 spots. Both this card and the number 1 card could probably be interchanged, but I decided to put this one at number 2. It's actually a bit of a debate, but I think I'm okay with this. So we've got Zeno Button. What does it do? It's an extra card with 0 cost, which is already like scary, but it has counterattack, switch all of your blue energy to active mode. So a little bit of backstory: when this card first came out, it wasn't terribly good. It took a very, very long time for this card to be good, and it kind of had like some niche applications for it. And the main reason is because one, it doesn't actually negate the attack, which I think some people got hung up on, but there wasn't as much interactivity during the combo step as there was today. In a lot of ways, you sure do get a bunch of your energy open, but we didn't have like the nutso hands that we had today, where we'd have like a bunch of cards in hand to do stuff. We'd have smaller hands, and most of the cards that we didn't have in hand, the best thing that this could do is you play it, and then you have a couple extra energy so you can do 10k combos. That was like the idea for this, or maybe it'd open up some energy so like the next attack you can negate. It was very like passive for that. Like you could use it to passively do something up later. But then we started getting stuff where like, oh cool, you want to play the Bardock Gate for 2 energy from your hand, that's super duper good. Or you want to like a rival stuff or anything like that. And also we're going into multicolor things, so this card could be used to untap like a blue-green energy or like a blue-yellow energy. This card started to avalanche very quickly and saying, okay cool, we gotta ban this card. And so that's pretty much the idea of it. The idea of untapping all of your energy seems pretty broken, but it took a lot to kind of get there. The decks that this card were kind of in before were like kind of like a blue control deck after SS3 got banned, and then also Hercule. This card was in there just because Hercule generated a lot of cards in hand, and which meant that there are like a bunch of 10k combos you could use, and you could use Zano Button, and then you'd want to use like Sensu Bean. Because Hercule also had like poor defense, so I think that was really good, and like you're rewarded for comboing with Hercule as well. But this had like a lot of spotty appearances, but like in the last half of like 2019, this was in like a lot of really good decks, especially Super Saiyan Broly, like the yellow one. He was running like he was able to do so much disgusting stuff because he was a yellow leader, and so the Bardocks were not very important for like you could use any color you wanted, and there's just like tricolor builds, and you could just untap half your energy because you're using Zeno Button. Like it was very broken, and I think this card deserved to be banned, and probably never, like I don't think there's any contestation, especially since there's just so much more and more battle step combo stuff going on right now, that being able to untap all your energy before a battle starts is very, very good now.
Number 1.
Real quick before we get to number 1, some quick honorable mentions. I picked like these 3 leaders, and but I pretty much say like most of the leaders from the set are really neat and interesting in a bunch of ways. They really got some really creative designs, which shows because people are still trying to use them nowadays, even though they're really bad, and not because like their effects aren't good, just because they don't generate value, and their design of like leaders should draw like 1 card per turn wasn't like a thing back then. So like a lot of these would just slowly not have as much advantage as like cards that exist nowadays. But I think they're all cool, and they're very reboot worthy. Vegito for sure, especially with all the colorless stuff it does with Son Goku and Vegeta. Like this card's a mess with the ruling wise, and like I bet they're like very tired about having to make sure like cards don't get like super abused by this. Zamasu is really neat, especially because like his like undying effect, where his the entire deck became like your life in a way. And now that we have 60 card decks, like maybe this could be a little bit more viable. Probably not, but like something. And then Goku Black, this is like people have already been theorizing stuff with it with Series 10. It has like some cheese, but I think this is a really cool deck, and like this is one of my favorite leaders from it as well. And I remember making some neat decks with it. But all these leaders I think could be rebooted and be very neat. We've also have some 2 extra tech cards. We've got Enraged Gohan's Awakening. So this is counterattack for 2. Place 1 card from your hand in your drop area. Choose one of your opponent's battle cards and KO it. So this was just really good generic destruction, and it was kind of like Green's version of Mokuba in a lot of ways. But being able to just KO a card for 2 energy felt good. And like there wasn't like any energy cost restriction, which a lot of destruction did have back in the day. So being able to use this card and just blow up your opponent's card felt good. Once we got barrier, this card kind of got a little bit worse though, and wasn't seen as much. But it was a way to get rid of good stuff. And like Mira was like I've seen like some people use it for. Because like that card would just be very, very bad to get hit by. But there's that, and then also Courageous Heart Yajirobe. This card was kind of relevant for like a little bit. It was block or revenge, and this was in a time where we didn't have as much card destruction going around. It wasn't as common to run it, so cards that were on the field were pretty good without protection. This doesn't barrier, so. But revenge also as an interesting keyword because it also gets around barrier. So a lot of control decks would run these Yajirobes, and so anything that something that had barrier couldn't swing anymore because they'd have to be they'd get KO'd by Yajirobe. So very interesting card there. It's kind of been not so good now that there's so much more destruction going on and doesn't have any protection, and we've pretty much have better ways to get around barrier. But this was definitely a good card back in the day to get around it. And so for number 1, we've got Behind the Shoe. Boom, Unyielding Spirit Trunks. Who saw it coming? Raise your hand. I saw it coming, but I made the list. This card's good for so many ways. It's pretty simple too. Like if you think of Zano Button, both these cards are just minimal text, seem pretty basic. But auto during your turn when you combo this card, if your leader card is blue, choose one of your energy, switch to active mode. Hey, what's the big deal? You just untap 1 for free? That doesn't. I mean, what's the big deal? This was obnoxiously good for such a long time, especially since it was also in blue, so it paired up really nice with Sensu Bean. It pretty much in a lot of ways aggressively meant like you have like another sense, like you're not running 4 Sensu Beans, you're running 8, because this does a lot of the same thing. Sure, you don't get the plus 5k for the turn, and this is only on attack, but you also, if you have 0 energy open, you now have 1 energy open, and that made such a big difference in the Storm format. This card was probably one of the infamous cards in that format just because most of the cards in that deck cost 1. So you either you can play Bardock for 1 energy, which goes into Go 10, which then you can swing with Unyielding Spirit Trunks, and then you untap your energy so you can play your Bardock again because now you've got 1 open again. It was just really degenerate. It was really good for also like going, if you're swinging and you have no energy open, your opponent's like, oh, okay, they probably can't do anything, and then Unyielding Spirit Trunks, and then you use Champa, and now something they could have negated, they didn't, and now you've got a big double strike and you can win the game. There's just so many ways, and this is like all before like arrival stuff. And if you've noticed kind of something with all the new like arrival cards and anything like that combos and untap something, it's during your opponent's turn now, which I think is better because this was just being aggressive with this card felt really, really bad, and it just meant for a lot of ways like you were able to get 1 more energy for free. It just felt very bad. So being able to use this kind of effect defensively, I think, is a bit better balanced. And yeah, this card's super banned, and I don't think it's ever going to be unbanned. It was limited for a while, and but it did finally get banned with a couple other kind of problem cards. But definitely super strong. If you think Zeno Button's better, let me know. But part of the reason that I decided to put this at number 1 was this got limited before Zeno Button ever got touched, so I felt like that was a factor. And this card was always good. There was never a period of time when this card was bad. There were times where Zeno Button was worse and where it wasn't used at all. But I would say, at least in this current format, Zeno Button is definitely more broken right now. But I think Trunks will, if you even at 1, like you always were like, okay, cool. Well, I'm running blue anyway, so I better just run this untap card. Like the fact that it's also like colorless, like energy you get to. Is really good, and like especially when they're going into like surge leaders, if something just happens to run blue, you're like, okay, cool, I guess I'll just run this 1 card because I'll get free untap for it, and and depending on what kind of deck you're actually running, that could make a big difference. So I'm talking enough about this card. This is the list. Let me know what you guys think about it. I think this top five, probably six, Android 17, 18 definitely deserves to be on this. It's pretty solid. Other four cards, let me know if what I missed and you think would be better for this list. And yeah, let me know what you think. And thank you guys so much for watching. I really like making these. It's a lot of fun. And we're going to probably do the 2017 promos after this before we get into Series 3. So that should also be a lot of fun too. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.